Today, we are diving into one of the greatest business comeback stories of all time. We're going to use Apple's legendary turnaround, not just as a cool story, but as a case study, really to understand a massive shift in how modern business strategy actually works. So let's just start with this question, because it's a wild one. In 1997, Apple was pretty much toast. They were literally weeks away from going under. Fast forward to today, and they're a global icon, one of the most valuable companies on Earth. So how in the world did that happen? That's the big mystery we're unpacking. All right, so to really get the comeback, you first have to understand just how bad things really were. We're going to go back to the late 90s, a time when Apple's future was, and I'm not exaggerating, hanging by a thread. Look, this wasn't just one problem. It was like a perfect storm of failure. Their product line was an absolute mess. A bunch of computers, printers, even video game consoles that nobody was buying. Inside the company, it was all power struggles and chaos. Their main software was falling way behind the times. And all of this led to the inevitable. Their market share was in a nosedive, and Wall Street had basically written them off for dead. And then, the catalyst for everything. In 1997, the board made a last-ditch, desperate move. They brought back the guy they'd fired over a decade earlier, Steve Jobs. His return kicked off a totally radical new plan. Jobs did not waste a single second. His first moves were incredibly fast and decisive. First, he just brutally simplified everything. He cut something like 70% of the product line to focus on just a handful of things that could actually be great. Then, he poured a ton of money back into R&D, betting that real innovation was their only way out. And then, in a move that made everyone's jaw drop, he started making deals with his old enemies. And this move right here just perfectly shows his new, pragmatic approach. For years, Apple and Microsoft were like mortal enemies, but Jobs knew Apple needed two things to survive: cash and a guarantee that Microsoft would keep making Office for the Mac. This one deal got them both. It totally shocked the tech world, and it sent a clear signal. The old, stubborn Apple was gone. But, this turnaround wasn't just about business deals and cutting products. It was about bringing the soul of the brand back to life. That legendary Think Different campaign, you barely ever saw a product in it. Instead, it was selling an idea. The idea that Apple was for the creative ones, the rebels, the people who saw things differently. It rebuilt that emotional connection with customers that had been completely lost. So, with the company back on its feet, it was time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. And this kicked off an era of just relentless innovation that didn't just make new gadgets, it completely redefined entire industries. This timeline really is the heart of the whole story. The iMac saved the company, for sure. But look at what happened next. The iPod wasn't just a gadget. It was connected to the iTunes Store, which completely changed how we buy music. The iPhone wasn't just a phone. It was a supercomputer in your pocket that was connected to an app store. See the pattern? Each product wasn't its own little island. It was a piece of a bigger, interconnected ecosystem that just kept growing. So what's the big takeaway here? Apple's story is so much more than just a bunch of cool products. It really represents a fundamental shift in how to even think about business strategy in our modern world.
This table pretty much says it all. It shows the clash between two eras of business. The old way, traditional strategy, was all about making a rigid 5-year plan and just hoping for the best. Apple's modern approach, it was adaptive, always changing, always learning. The old way was to try and be the cheapest. Apple said, nope, we're going to be the absolute best for the people who really care. Instead of small, safe little tweaks, they went for huge, radical, industry-shattering ideas. And like we saw, they embraced powerful partners instead of trying to do it all alone.
Let's just zoom in on that one idea for a second: alliances. The old way was like building a fortress, treat everyone like an enemy. Apple's new way was to figure out who the key players were, like Microsoft for software, Intel for their chips, or the music labels for iTunes, and then build these super powerful, selective partnerships that made the final product better for everybody. If there's one fancy business term that explains all of this, it's this one: dynamic capabilities. Just think of it as the secret sauce, the engine behind Apple's success. It's not just about having smart people or lots of money. It's the company's actual ability to constantly reshuffle its resources, to pivot from computers to music to phones, to see what's coming next and reinvent itself to stay ahead of the game. It's basically agility on a massive scale.
So what was the result of this huge strategic shift? Well, to put it lightly, the results are absolutely monumental.
Over $2 trillion. Just let that number sink in. $2 trillion. I mean, this is the ultimate proof that the strategy worked. This is the transformation from a company that was literally weeks from dying to becoming, at times, the most valuable company in the entire world. It's just a staggering, unbelievable outcome.
And you know what? The evolution didn't stop when Steve Jobs passed away. His successor, Tim Cook, didn't just copy the playbook, he adapted it. He brought his own genius for logistics and operations and masterfully expanded Apple into services and subscriptions. This proved that the strategy itself was dynamic. It could evolve with new leaders and new challenges.
Which brings us to our final thought here. Apple's journey shows us this clear evolution, right? From an old-school, rigid playbook to a dynamic, flexible, ecosystem-driven model. So the big question this leaves for all of us is, what's next? What's going to be the strategic playbook that defines the next company to completely change the world?